Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's hearing. I'm here as usual with my fellow panel members, Ms. Thuria Istefan and Mr. Ali Akbar.
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone.
Before we go back to the witness, can I please just remind those of you who are not taking an active part in the hearing to keep your cameras and microphones switched off at all times to avoid difficulties with the technology. Thank you very much. Now, today we're going to continue hearing evidence from Miss Deborah French. So we are now going over to see her. Miss French, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you, sir.
Good morning. Can you see me and can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much. No, I don't really need to remind you of everything I said yesterday, but I think it would be a good thing if you could just confirm, as you did yesterday, that you're alone in the room from which you're giving evidence.
Yes, I am, sir.
Thank you. That you have no documents or other materials with you.
No, none.
And that your mobile phone is in another room and you don't have any other electronic device which is capable of receiving messages.
No, nothing, sir.
Very good. Thank you very much indeed. Well, as yesterday, your legal representatives are here, as it were, in on the hearing, so that if they feel it's necessary to intervene, they can do so. I hope we'll avoid the sort of problem we had yesterday with the transcript. I'm confident that we shall. And as yesterday, we'll have a break during the morning and the afternoon, about halfway through. Is there anything you'd like to raise before we continue with your evidence?
No, nothing. Thank you.
All right. Well, in that case, I'll invite Mr. Millett to continue his questioning. Yes, Mr. Millett.
Chairman, thank you very much. Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, members of the panel. Good morning, Ms. French. I want to ask you now, please, about your presentations that you would give from time to time, that you refer to in your second witness statement. If we can go to your second witness statement, please, at page 5. You say at paragraph 21, if we can just have that expanded a little bit, please, that you gave a presentation or prepared a presentation for the RIBA as part of a continuing professional development program. And you refer to that in the first 2 or 3 sentences of that paragraph. My question is a general one rather than focusing specifically on that presentation. Did you give presentations to other organizations involving architects or designers?
I certainly did with RIBA. I did on occasions do it with main contractors if I was invited by fabricators, for example. But as a general rule, it was one-to-one with an architect rather than, you know, we did CPD with architects practices, which would be over a lunchtime period, so on and off.
And were you invited to give those presentations, or did you promote? Was it part of a promotion by Arconic?
If it was with RIBA or architectural CPD deliveries, it was generally something that we were trying to promote, or we were invited by architects to attend. If it was with other clients, it was generally them requesting us to do it.
Were you accredited to give CPD presentations to architects?
We had one presentation that was RIBA accredited to deliver to architects in a formal CPD environment.
You say you don't believe you actually ever gave the particular RIBA presentation that you refer to. Is that correct?
Yes, I don't think it was. We'd had it approved by RIBA, but it was never actually delivered.
But in order to give that kind of presentation and to put it together, you must have had some kind of technical knowledge about cladding. Is that fair?
The information that was put together in that presentation, a lot of that was taken from the information already within Arconic, and any other from brochures and various things like that, then there was a set text that would have gone with it.
Yes, but in order to give the presentation, am I right in thinking that you would have had to have had at least some familiarity, working familiarity with the documents that formed the presentation?
Yeah, I would have had enough knowledge to have been able to answer some questions, but in terms of the more technical details with relation to, you know, wind loads or build-ups, then I would have taken questions and sent that back over to Merksheim afterwards.
So you would have had some technical knowledge, at least enough to be able to enable you to field questions from the floor at the end of the presentation?
On some subjects, not on all, no.
What about on fire safety?
No, I would never have gone into discussions with fire on anybody. As I've said before, I didn't have the knowledge or the experience to do that on fire.
Were you accompanied by anybody from the technical sales team when giving these presentations?
No.
So what would happen if somebody asked a question at the end of the presentation about fire safety, such as, what are the tests that underlie the claim that PE standard has class 0 or should be regarded as class 0?
I would have arranged to have the necessary documents sent to them, or I would have referred it to our technical team in Merksheim. I would not have answered that myself.
Why were you being sent into the field to give these presentations if you weren't able to answer a question such as that?
And as I said, I've had limited technical experience to be able to answer certain points. I would gather the information and I would get back to them afterwards.
Doing the best you can with your recollection, do you recall any particular kinds of questions that you were repeatedly asked at the end of these kinds of presentations? It
was unusual to get an awful lot of questions at the end of formal CPDs. They tended to, the audience that you were delivering it to tended to come in, they listened, and then they would basically disperse and go off. So I don't recall having masses of questions at the end. There might have been one or two about projects or colours mostly, or samples that they wanted because they were looking at specific projects. Very, very, very rare would we get a lot of technical questions.
Do you remember ever being asked a question about fire classification?
I can't recall being asked that specific question.
Let's talk about a presentation that you think you did give. If we can go to paragraph 96 of this statement on page 31, please. You can see that this paragraph is under the heading Genius Facades Simcoe, and you describe in it well, not only your relationship with Genius Facades connected to a business called Simcoe, but also a presentation that you gave. And if you look about a third of the way down that paragraph, you say there that you gave a presentation. You say, I gave a presentation to Simcoe on this project in around May 2011. And that project, as you described earlier in the paragraph, was Pendleton, which was a large project in Manchester or Salford involving 3 buildings. Is it right that Genius Facades was a customer of yours?
Yes, they were.
And you say, as I've just shown you, that they are connected or were connected to a business called Simcoe External Framing Solutions, or Simcoe, if you like. Is that right? They were. Right. Now, is it right that the connection that you had was through a man called John Simmons and possibly also Graham Smith?
Yes.
Is it right that they were partners in Simcoe?
I believe so, yes.
And is it right that John Simmons and Graham Smith also owned and ran Genius Facades together? Does that sound right to you?
Certainly John Simmons ran Genius Facades, but I'm not entirely sure of the connection of Graham with Genius.
Very good. Well, let me just read into the record one reference. It's John Simmons' first witness statement at MET 30408088 at page 1. Let's look at the presentation about the Pendleton's project. This is in your exhibit DF5 at page 10. That's MET 3053173 at page 10, please. And we can see on the front that if we have that expanded a little bit, please, you'll see that it's Reynobond Bond, Reynolux Lux, aluminium Reynobond Bond. See that? And underneath that it says Reynobond Bond working with Simcoe, Pendleton's Project Manchester. So is this an example, before we go into the document, of you working with a cladding subcontractor, specialist subcontractor?
It was on this particular project, yes.
Right. And would that be quite a common occurrence, that you would work together with a cladding subcontractor such as Simcoe?
In terms of pulling together a presentation of this detail, this was the only one that we did it with on in this nature.
Let's look at page 14, please. You can see that before we leave that page, I should have pointed out to you, this is May 2011. If we go to page 14, this says, I'll wait for that to come up. It says Reynobond 55 specification details for Pendleton's Manchester, Simcoe. And if we just go back to your second statement at page 96 again, please, paragraph 31, you say there that the Pendleton project and cassette in Reynobond 55 PE. You say that about a third of the way down the page in front of you. It was an unusual design which I think incorporated both rivet and cassette systems.
Yeah.
And if we then go back to the presentation, please, at page 15, let's look at the last two bullet points together. Have those blown up. It says Reynobond has a BBA certificate, hard copy available with this presentation. And then last bullet point, relevant UK and European fire certificates. Does that tell us that in May 2011, you knew at least enough about the European fire certificates to know that they were relevant to UK customers, your UK customers?
I'm not sure I would have known that they were completely relevant. In what context they were relevant? I was pulling information out of other marketing information and brochures to pull that document together for a customer.
What was relevant about the European fire certificates on this project?
As I say, I would have been just taking information from other parts of the documentation that was available within other marketing information and putting that on that document.
Why would you do that unless you thought that the European fire certificates were relevant to this UK customer and this UK project?
Because that text would have been available somewhere in another document, and I would have just used it in that format.
Well, unthinkingly, just cut and pasted it from another document?
Yes.
Which document? Do you know?
No, I don't recall.
Did you not think that it was important as part of the sale that the customer, either Simcoe or the end customer, could be provided with the European fire certificates if they'd asked?
If they'd have asked, we would have provided it for them, but I wouldn't have known whether it was relevant or not.
When you were cutting and pasting this last bullet point from some other document into this one, did you not apply your mind to the question of whether or not European fire certificates were relevant?
No, I don't recall doing that, no.
Right, so this was just a knee-jerk cut and paste without thinking about it?
No, it was putting together some information to present to a client. And as I say, if they'd have wanted information further, then we would have provided it for them.
I feel bound to suggest to you, Ms. French, that you would not, in fact, have referred to the relevant UK and European fire certificates. You wouldn't have felt it necessary to mention the European fire certificates unless you knew that they were relevant to your customer here.
As I say, I would have taken that information from another document, and if customers had asked for the information, then I would have made sure that they had the relevant documents.
Can we just go back to your second witness statement, please, at page 13? And let's look together at paragraph 47, please. You say there, I did not spend much time, if any, considering the European fire testing regime and what the various ratings meant, neither did I think them relevant to the UK market. If the European fire testing regime was, as you thought, not relevant to the UK market, is your explanation for why your presentation referred to them that you simply didn't think about it?
As I've said, I would have taken that text from another document and I would have put it onto that presentation without necessarily, thinking what I was putting on there.
Was it your habit to build up presentations for customers for substantial products like Pendleton's without really applying your mind to whether what you were putting into your presentations was relevant?
I would have been putting together information that I thought was relevant and correct at the time, and it would have been for other people to ask me questions as to whether there was other information they needed, and I would have provided that for them.
See, what I'm really suggesting to you, being blunt about it, is that you knew very well that European fire certifications were relevant to the UK market because that's why you put it in your presentation.
No, I don't recall thinking along those details. As I say, technically, I wouldn't have been thinking along those lines. If people had wanted information, I would have provided it for them.
Now, we've seen that you also referred in this presentation to the BBA certificate available. What did you think was the purpose of the BBA certificate, which we looked at yesterday, referring to the Euro Class B test pass for standard PE, if it was irrelevant to the UK market?
As I explained yesterday, I didn't understand my knowledge of the detail in that BBA was something that other people would have been asking questions about, and I really wouldn't have given it too much thought at the time as to whether it was or wasn't relevant.
Does it come to this, that you didn't know the details of the classification regime applicable in Europe, Euro system, but you did know that it was relevant to your UK customers, but if they asked questions about it, that was a matter for them?
In terms of the BBA, if there was, like I said, I've said before, I wasn't technically trained. I've had no technical training. I was there to provide information, and if customers had questions, I would have asked me and I would have made sure I got them the appropriate information and documents. I was not qualified to understand the details that were set out in those.
You may not have been qualified to understand the details, but I am suggesting to you that you knew enough to know that the Euro classification regime for fire safety was relevant to your UK market.
No, I wouldn't have done.
And if you didn't know it was relevant or didn't think it was relevant to the UK market, why did you think it was referred to in the BBA certificate at all?
I don't know. It's not something that I picked up or would have even questioned at the time.
So you didn't pick up. Does that mean you didn't notice its presence in the BBA certificate?
I don't recall what I remember in looking at that document at the time.
Can we look at your witness evidence about how this slide deck was created? This is back to page 31, paragraph 96 again. And you say here, about halfway down the page that we've got in front of you, open on the screen, you say, I gave a presentation to Simco on this project in around May 2011, which included reference to both the BBA certificate and the product having both UK and European fire certificates. 2 copies of this presentation are included in DF5, and I think that the contents of these presentations was based on a standard Arconic presentation, and the specific input was obtained from Claude Vale in relation to the 30-year warranty, and Yves Bielman on other points. Peter Froelich was aware of the presentation. Now, you say this was taken, as you told us this morning as well, from another presentation. Do you remember whether the claims about the European certification in the original presentation, which you lifted this from, were there, or were they added following input from somebody at Arconic?
I really don't recall the exact detail of where that information came from in relation to the question you've just asked.
Now you say that Claude Vale had input and Peter Froelich was aware of the presentations I've just shown you. Did either of those individuals write any part of this presentation?
I had information from them in relation to certain aspects of that presentation, and I would have taken information and put that whole presentation together myself. They were both aware of it. What
aspects of the presentation did Yves Bielman provide?
There was some information on the paint that was being offered in relation to the 30-year warranty. It's unusual to offer a warranty of that period, and Yves Bielman pulled together some information on the gloss levels and the way the gloss would behave over that 30-year period.
Did either of those, or any of those three individuals, suggest to you that you should refer to the European minute?
I don't recall.
Did either or any of those individuals look over the slides in the final presentation that you gave?
Some of the information that was in that presentation, some of the images and some of the wording would have come from them, and then I would have pulled it into that overall presentation.
And as a general question, we looked at diagram 40 yesterday, but just to be very clear, are you telling the inquiry that at this stage, at least 2011, you did not know that that approved document B, forming guidance as part of the building regulations, referred to national and European fire classification standards?
No, I wouldn't have known that.
You say you wouldn't have known that. Did you know that?
No, I don't recall I did.
I'd like to look at your knowledge of fires involving cladding, starting in 2009, if I can. And can we start with your second witness statement, please? So this is the same statement we're in, at page 34, at paragraph 100. And you give a list here of previous fires that you do recall. You say, save for the fires in the UAE referred to above, this is in the third line, I'm not aware of any other fire involving ACM. I vaguely recall a fire in or near Paris, but I cannot remember any details, including whether it involved ACM. And then you go on to say that you don't remember anything about the Melbourne fire. Now in 2009, there were two cladding fires I want to ask you about. The first is one in Bucharest at the Millennium Business Centre in July 2009. Were you aware of that fire?
No, I wasn't.
I take it that nobody at Arconic discussed this fire with you, told you about it, alerted you to it. Is that right?
I've never heard of, never heard it.
Never heard it, never heard of it. Was there any discussion in 2009, do you remember, about a PE cord cladding fire?
Not that I recall, no.
Is there any particular discussion about the safety of PE cord ACM in architectural application in 2009 that you recall within Arconic?
Not that I recall, no.
Did Mr. Vale ever tell you, in the context of a cladding fire, that PE core can be dangerous when it comes to architecture?
I don't recall.
Do you remember that there was another fire in July 2009, which had fatal consequences in South London in a building called Lakenal House?
No, I don't recall.
You don't recall?
No.
You weren't aware in 2009 or the years following 2009 of the Lakenal House fire, is that right?
No, I've not heard of Lakenal House.
Even today, you've not heard of it?
No, it doesn't. No.
Right. Moving forward then in time to 2011, by 2011, you had been at Arconic for around 4 years or so. Is that right?
Yes.
Let's look at some documents in 2011. I'm going to show you some documents which show that there were further European classification tests done on Reynobond PE in that year at the CSTB in France. And the first one I'm going to show you is a test in February 2011 of Reynobond PE in rivet fix. And this is at ARC 50383. This is a reaction to fire classification report, RA 110032, done under EN 13501 Part 1. It's the European regime. And you can see on the page in front of you there that it was a test done on Reynobond 55 PE riveted system, so PE rivet, with the date of issue of this report of the 9th of February 2011. And if we go on in this document to page 3, we can see the classification. I apologize, page 4, the classification, and it obtains a BS1D0. You see that?
Yes.
There was also a test done in June 2011. Well, sorry, I should ask you, first of all, were you aware of this test?
I wouldn't have necessarily been specifically aware. I don't recall being totally aware of it.
Did anybody at Arconic tell you that Reynobond PE in a rivet fix had been tested in 2011 and had obtained a BS1D0?
I don't recall.
Right. There was also a test, and I'll just tell you what happened. There was a test in 2011 in June of that year on Reynobond PE in cassette fix, in which large pieces fell from the panel. There was widespread fire on the surface, and the heat performance was so poor that the test had to be stopped, as a result of which there was no classification other than F. Do you remember that?
No, I don't remember.
I'm going to give a reference, but I'm not going to take you to the document. It's MET 53158, page 172. Do you remember that in October 2011, Arconic had another test performed on Reynobond PE in cassette fix, which achieved a class E?
No, I don't recall.
You don't know that. No one ever told you about that either, did they?
No, not that I recall, no.
Would you have expected to be made aware of those test results?
If it was relevant for the UK market, then yes, but otherwise not really.
Would you have expected to have been told that the cassette fix variant of Reynobond 55 PE had failed a European fire test to such an extent that it could only be classified as an F?
If it had been relevant to the any impact on the UK, then yes.
How could it conceivably not have been relevant to its impact on the UK, given that that was one of the variants of PE that you were selling in the UK market?
And as I say, if they'd have seen that it was necessary for me to know that for the UK, then yes, I would have expected to know.
Can we then turn to a meeting in Freiburg? This is at MET 3053158 _ P04, page 35, please. Now, this is a document recording a meeting which I do not think you were present at, but let me show you what it says. It's written by Claude Vale, and it was a meeting in Freiburg, on the 5th of July 2011, as you can see with me. People present: Frank Ritter of 3A, people of AAP Merksheim present, Peter Fröhlich and Claude Vale. You see that?
Yes.
And if you scroll down to the table on the first page, you can see some products. You'll see a table. Just to be clear, Frank Ritter of 3A was the manufacturer of Alucobond. Is that right?
I don't know.
Well, at least 3A was the manufacturer, if not Mr. Ritter himself. In the table, you can see that there's the product, the system, and the European class standard set out there. And you can see that what is said above that table is European fire regulation. Remind, the European fire reaction classification norm EN 13501 is testing the product in his installation conditions. After the tests we did, the classifications for Rainabond in cassettes and rivet screwed system are, and then they're set out. Rainabond 55 PE riveted screwed B S1 D0, Rainabond 55 PE cassette E, and then at the FR results are set out below that, in each case B S1 D0. Did you know that Arconic was presenting its cassette variant of RB55 PE as Class E to Alucobond 3A in July 2011? Did you know that as a fact?
No, I didn't.
Can you explain how you did not know that fact?
No, I can't.
Is that a fact that you would have expected to be told?
If they'd have seen it necessary and it was relevant to my role, then yes, but no, I don't recall it.
Given that it is radically different from what the BBA certificate states about the test results for Rainabond 55 PE as standard, I suggest to you that you would have wanted to know that so far from being a B in cassette, it was E. I must be right, mustn't it?
Yes, if they'd have seen it, and if it was relevant to the role I was doing, then I would have expected to be told about it.
Can we look down to the bottom of that same page then, please? Under next steps, but below the table, it says, for the moment, even if we know that PE material in cassette has a bad behavior exposed to fire, we can still work with national regulations who are not as restrictive. Some countries, Spain, ... are already working with the EN 13501 standards, and the PE in cassettes is no more usable there. The evolution of fire regulation will put the PE out of the market in the coming months, etc. My question is, did you realize yourself that Arconic considered that PE cassette had bad behavior in fire?
No, I didn't.
Were you aware, notwithstanding what we can see in this document, that Arconic intended to continue to sell Rainabond PE to countries that are not working solely with the European classification system?
I wouldn't have had that knowledge or thought about whether that it was relevant or not. It's not something that I was involved in day to day. That would have been for the technical team and other senior management people at Merksheim to be making those decisions, not me.
The countries that were not working solely with the European classification system included the UK, didn't they?
I really don't know.
You didn't know that at the time? You didn't know that there was a dual system operating here?
No, I wouldn't have had any reason to know. That would have been dealt with by other people, the technical people and other people within Merksheim. That's not something I would have been involved in.
Did nobody ever communicate the strategy to you that Arconic was going to continue to sell PE cassette, notwithstanding its bad behaviour in fire, in the UK market, precisely because it had a dual system here?
Not that I recall, no.
We move to 2012 then, in the chronology, and I want to ask you about more cladding fires in that year. Can we start with your second witness statement, please, page 29, paragraph 93.1. And in that paragraph you say, and I should just preface this actually with the heading, companies involved in the Grenfell Tower refurbishment. With regard to the relevant companies and organisations that were involved in the Grenfell Tower refurbishment, I would say as follows. CEP. I had worked with CEP on a number of projects in the past, on all of which they had ordered Reynobond PE. One notable project was the Chalcots estate in Camden, which was a substantial project involving 5 residential towers. It was a significant project for which Reynobond had been used in a rivet system. I remember that there had been a small fire at one of the towers, Taplow, on the Chalcots estate in 2012, for which replacement sheets of Reynobond had been ordered. While I cannot recall the fire at Taplow Tower specifically, I do remember undertaking CEP's original order of Reynobond for the Chalcots Tower. The project had, if you just turn over the page, originally been supplied with Etalbond, a competitor brand of ACM, but it was replaced with Reynobond after a number of issues with delamination. Now, I can pause there, I think, and ask you to go to page 34, 4 pages on, paragraph 100, we've looked at a moment ago. Just coming back to it, you pick out the UAE fire and the vague recollection of a fire in Paris, but no other fires, you say, apart from the Chalcots fire. Were you specifically aware of the Chalcots fire because you had been involved in the reordering of the panels? Is that why you knew about that one?
Yeah, the fact that we'd had there'd been some emails from CEP requesting some replacement panels because of a small fire.
You also refer, as I showed you before, to the fire in or near Paris. Do you remember when that was?
I don't recall that, no.
Was it the Mermoz Tower fire in Roubaix in 2012, May 2012?
As I say, I don't recall the name or any specific details. I just remember hearing something about there being one.
Right. What was the source of your hearing about there being one? Do you remember?
I really can't remember.
Within Arconic or on the news or some publication?
I really can't remember.
Let's go to MET 53158, please. Underscore P06, page 171. MET 53158 underscore P06, page 171. Yes, thank you very much. This appears to be part of a sales team meeting in mid-2012. And if we go to page 189 of that document, we can see here a slide entitled News about Certification, Fire Issues, Incendie Roubaix, New Changes Coming in the Building Rules. Did you see this slide at the time? As I say, we've dated it to about mid-2012 for reasons appearing in other parts of the document. But do you remember seeing this document at about that time, Ms. French?
I can't remember. I don't recall it.
Is this how, or might this be how you learnt about the Roubaix fire?
I really can't remember. I'm sorry, but I can't recall.
Were you not provided with any information about cladding fires around the world from within Arconic, those people in your reporting line above you?
I don't recall anything, no.
Did you ever have any discussions with other salespeople or your manager, Peter Froley, about other cladding fires elsewhere in the world?
There was not specifically in relation to that. There was one in the UAE that I got sent from somebody else that I sent over to our technical team for some comments on. I don't recall any other information being sent.
We'll come to the UAE in a little bit of detail shortly. Sticking with the period 2012, if we may for the moment then, I'd like to ask you some questions about the changes in product literature at that time. Can we please have up side by side the following pair of documents? ARC 30378 and ARC, I'm so sorry, I'll start again. ARC 50378 and ARC 50388. We can have those up side by side. We can see that this is a list of certifications in several languages. And we have been told by Arconic's solicitors, DLA Piper, that the version on the left, 378, was produced in 2010, and the document on the right, 388, was produced in 2012. My first question is, are you familiar with these documents, even sitting here today?
I don't recall them, no.
To show you a little bit more detail, they are in 3 different languages, English, French, and German, it appears. And in fact, other languages as well across the page, Spanish, Italian, and Russian. Do you know who within Arconic produced documents such as this?
No, I don't, I'm sorry.
To assist you further, if you look at the English version on the left-hand side, certifications, all Renault Bond architecture and Renault products are subjected to strict internal quality tests. Then a little bit lower down it says Renault Bond architecture certification, and goes on in the text to say, so far no European standards exist for aluminium composite panels. Until this Euro norm standard is realised throughout Europe, Renault Bond architecture products will be certified according to 3 aspects in all countries. These are product certification, reaction to fire certification, and system certification. That's what the documents are about to this extent. Do we take it from your answers you've given so far on this document that you were never provided with these to use in your marketing?
I don't recall seeing them, no.
You able to explain what they were used for?
Sorry, could you ask the question again?
That's what they were used for.
I don't know.
Can we look at page, we'll have those documents back up, please, and look at pages 3 and 5 of each of them. Page 3 in ARC 50378 and page 5 in ARC 50388. We can see that happily this time they're both in English and other languages, but the English we can see. And this is 2.1 certification. And if you look in the 2010 version on page 3, on the left-hand side, you can see under fire certification that Europe there under country, you see it lists both PE and FR core. And you can see that PE core is listed as BS2D0 and the FR is listed as BS1D0. You see that?
Yes.
If you look at the right-hand side, which is the 2012 version, page 5 of the 2012 version, you can see that the under Europe, only the FR certification is listed there, BS1D0. There's no claim there about the PE classification under the Euro system at all. My question is, do you know why that change happened?
No, I don't.
Did you know that the change had happened as a fact?
No, I didn't.
You're not able to explain it?
No,
right?
I can't.
Were you aware of any decision at a high level, or a higher level than you perhaps, within Arconic to remove references to Class B on its marketing literature for Renault Bond PE between 2010 and 2012?
No, I wouldn't have been made aware of any of that.
Are you able to explain why this document or these documents are in English if these documents were not intended for the UK market?
I can't explain that, no.
These documents that you would have expected to have been provided with for use in your sales efforts in the UK market?
They possibly were part of the marketing documents I had. There was a number of brochures that I had available to me, but I could very well have used them.
You could very well have used them?
Or sent them out, yes, if they were available to me.
Right. Being available to you, I see, okay. Being available to you, you wouldn't have sent them out without being thoroughly familiar with them, would you?
In terms of all the technical aspects, then no, I wouldn't have been studying them and and understanding every aspect of it and questioning it to that degree, no.
Would you have been expected to have been told by those who provided you with the 2012 version that some aspects of it had changed?
If it was relevant to what I was doing, yes.
Right. Did anybody, as a fact, ever point out to you that the 2012 version had changed from the 2010 version because the European Class B reference in relation to PE had been removed and only the FR version was referred to?
No, I don't recall.
Do you remember ever alerting your customers to the fact that the 2012 document had been updated or changed from the 2010 version, or indeed any earlier version?
No, no, I don't recall.
Would you be expected to be told by those providing you with this document that even though you needn't worry yourself about the changes, there were changes in it and the customer should look carefully for them?
Yes, it would have been useful to have some pointers.
Yes. Who provided you with these documents in 2010 and 2012, respectively? Do you remember?
They would have come either from our marketing team or the sales technical team.
Could you give us some names, though? First of all, who in the marketing team would have given you these documents?
As I explained yesterday, I can't remember the name of the people that were in the marketing team at the time.
Who in the sales technical team would have given you these documents?
That would have been Claude and his team.
When you say Claude and his team, do you mean Claude Vale?
Claude Vale, or and I can't remember the other. There was two others in the team. Unfortunately, I can't remember their names.
What about Peter Froelich? Would he have been the one to have provided you with these documents? Do you think?
He could have passed those on to me. Yes.
What about Nicolas or Nicolas Rémy? What about him?
I think I can't remember which. I recognise the name. I think he was in the sales technical team, but I can't be certain.
What about Philippe? This is difficult to pronounce, but I hope I get it right. Philippe Ventron, or Ventron, as it would read in English.
He worked with the sales technical team.
He provided these documents to you?
Sorry, say that again.
He provides these documents to you?
He may have done, but I would think it would come from the marketing team.
When these documents came to you, how did they come? Did they come by post or by email?
We had them on both. Some of them were on the website that you could download. Some would come as hard copies and be posted over to me. And then latterly they were on a digital format. Right.
Would somebody email you and attach them to the email and say, here you are, you should be using this version of these documents for your marketing?
I don't recall any emails of that nature.
If you downloaded them from the website, what told you that they were there on the website relevant to you, such that you should download them?
Nothing other than somebody requesting it, and I would generally I'd got it stored on my own laptop.
But how would you notice? How would you go about getting it? You go onto the website. What would tell you that you needed to check the website to look for these documents?
Nothing. It was, what I'm saying is that those brochures could have been on the website to be able to download them from there.
But did nobody in the sales technical team alert you to the fact that they existed and say, go and look at the website, you'll need them? That kind of...
No, I don't recall that.
So what would prompt you to go to the website and look for documents such as these?
If a customer had asked for something and it was the quickest way to get it to them was to show them the website and get them to take it off the website.
So sorry. Right. What kind of question would you get from a customer which would prompt you to look for this document?
If they just general questions, or if they wanted a brochure about Renabond, any information about Renabond, it would be you'd send them the group product brochure.
Right, but if, as you told us, the fire classification regime for Renabond was irrelevant to your market, what was the point of finding your customers a document which had the product certifications for France, Germany, Great Britain, Poland, Russia, Italy, Spain, etc., and the European classifications?
Because that was the general documents that were in circulation, so I would have to send that out.
Yes, and so you would have sent it because it was relevant to a customer who wanted it, wouldn't you?
Because they'd asked for it, so I would send that document out, or a general Renabond document out.
But you would know that your customers were interested in the Euro classifications, not only Class North.
It depends what they were asking the question on. It could have been that they were asking for information to do with colours or the types of panels that could be made. It wouldn't necessarily always be about fire. It could have been just general questions about Renabond and the product.
If you were, let me try and get it this way. How would you be told, or would you be told by anyone in Arconic, that these documents changed from year to year or period to period?
I don't recall.
You would need to be, wouldn't you? You'd need to be told that a document that you had previously accessed or previously been sent by post had been updated.
As I've said before, if they'd see it would be, yes, I would have been told, or they would have been alerting me to the fact that there'd been some changes, but I don't recall how that happened.
If we compare page 1 of the document on the left-hand side, 378, ARC 50378, and page 3 of the later document, ARC 50388, we can just have those up, please, at the same time. We had those before. They appear to be identical, don't they?
Yes, without reading them word for word, but yes.
All right, take it from me that they are identical or substantially identical. We haven't been able to see anything in this document, either on this page or anywhere else, to tell the customer clearly that the one on the right, 2012, is a new document updated from the one on the left, 2010. Is that right? Not just as a matter of reading the documents, but would that be a correct conclusion? There's nothing in the right-hand document, 2012, to say that the 2010 document has been revised, amended, updated in any way.
It's difficult for me to answer without having understood all of the detail, but no, I can't see anything that points it out.
More generally, were you ever told by Peter Froelich or anybody in the sales technical team to tell your customers that your marketing literature had changed?
Not that I recall.
Can we look at Claude Vale's witness statement, please? This is MET 30 53190. At page 28, paragraph 96. And he says there, well, he says a lot. I think it's probably worth just showing you all of this paragraph. There's one particular part I want to look at in detail with you. But he says this: in relation to the removal from the relevant marketing materials of the EN classification reference for the PE product, I sent 2 emails in May 2012 requesting a meeting with Claude Schmidt. And on the second occasion, on 29th of May 2012, Claude Schmidt responded, asking what the meeting was for. I confirmed that it was for a discussion on how the fire classifications are affecting the position in Europe. I do not recall actually meeting with Claude Schmidt, but had a brief discussion early the following week, when it was agreed between us that the reference to EN Class B in the marketing documents should be removed, as it was no longer a wholly accurate reflection of the position. It was agreed that the sales team for each jurisdiction should be told of the ENE classification so that they could take this into account as relevant to their jurisdiction, and not all jurisdictions allowed the sale of PE in any event. The intention was for customers to be informed of the position when asking about the fire performance of the cassette variant of the product, and that the classification was available on the CSTB website. All of this was actioned. I do not know exactly how this was done. It could have been by discussion or by sending customers the updated marketing material. With respect to the communication to the sales team, I believe that the result would have been placed in the toolbox for their use. Now, do you recall, having seen what Mr. Vale says there, being told by anybody at Arconic in 2012 that Reynobond was no longer Class B in the European tests?
No, I don't recall.
Do you recall ever being instructed or advised to tell your UK customers that Reynobond was no longer Class B in the European tests?
I don't recall.
If Mr. Vale is telling the truth in paragraph 96 of his statement, are you able to explain why you weren't told?
No, I don't. I can't answer that.
Was there any discussion in any meetings of this change?
Not that I can recall.
You sent any emails to tell your UK customers that our Reynobond 55 PE was no longer Class B?
I recall having since gone through the details since the Grenfell, there were some emails in relation to that came from Claude in relation to the cassettes.
In 2000
applications. But I don't. Sorry, say again.
Sorry, I spoke over you, and that's my fault. That was in 2014, wasn't it? I think.
Yes, it would have been.
Yes. Just focusing on 2012, do you remember any emails telling you to tell your UK customers that Reynobond was no longer Class B?
Not that I recall, no.
Did anybody instruct you in any way to get this message out to your customer base?
Not that I recall, no.
We discussed the toolbox yesterday, and is it right to say, on the basis of what you told us yesterday, that even if the toolbox had been updated, you would not have known to access it?
No, that's right.
Now, we can see that Mr. Vale says, if we can go back to his statement, please, at paragraph 96. We just go back to the document we were on. He says that the intention was for customers to be informed of the position. You can see he says that 2/3 of the way down the paragraph. I showed you that before.
Yes.
Did any customers actually ask about the fire performance of Reynobond, and in particular the fire performance of cassette fix at this time, 2012?
Not that I can recall.
Now, in her witness statement, and I'll just give the reference without going to it, Gwenaëlle Durandanger says at paragraph 34 on page 11 of her statement that they did not ask. Do you agree with that?
Yes, as I've said, I don't recall any asking.
If Claude Vale's intention was, as he says in his statement, that customers would be told of the position when asking, do we take from that that if the customers didn't ask, they didn't get told?
If they weren't, yes.
Does it follow from that that it was unlikely for a customer in the UK to find out about the up-to-date European classifications for Reynobond 55?
Yes.
They wouldn't know to ask if there'd been a change unless they knew there'd been a change, would they?
No.
How would they know that there'd been a change?
They wouldn't unless they were told.
If you had been told at the time that of what we now see, namely that Reynobond 55 PE was no longer a European Class B, would you have told your customers?
I honestly, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. If I'd been told that, if I'd been asked that that's they all needed to know, then I would have made sure that that communication went out to them.
Right. What if you had been told only to tell them if they asked about the fire performance of the cassette variant of the product, as Mr. Vale says? What if you'd been asked that question? What would you have said then?
It's difficult to answer that at this time. I can't really answer that.
I want just to look across then at what was happening at this time in 2012 on the Grenfell Tower project. 2012, you'll appreciate, French, was early days for Grenfell. And I can start, I think, please, by asking you some questions about your connection with the fabricators. Can we look at your first witness statement, please? MET 301963 at page 2. And we can see there, paragraph 6, you say there, as a sales manager, my primary focus was the origination and sale of the Reynobond product in the UK market. And since Arconic had, and still has, so far as I am aware, a number of commercial competitors selling product equivalent to the Reynobond range, then a lot of my efforts were focused on developing customer relationships with fabricators and promoting the Reynobond brand in the marketplace. Just pausing there. Well, actually, I'll read you the rest. Naturally, this included fielding inquiries regarding the range of colours for that product, as well as pricing inquiries and preparing estimates and quotations. My main contacts were fabricators who would buy the product and cut to size and shape according to project needs, and who were often approached by main contractors or specialist cladding installers. A few major house builders and architects were also among my contacts. Can we take it from that you had a deliberate marketing strategy to have good relationships with fabricators?
Yes, I was focusing on that element.
And fabricators for you were, is this right, the platform by which you could market Reynobond to the end user?
It was a way of us getting more exposure to Reynobond on certain projects.
And does that mean that you would aim to have a smaller number of good contacts, fabricators, rather than trying to have a lot of direct relationships with designers, contractors, employers, and so forth?
Yes.
Yes. Can we just look at a document, which is a presentation given to you, we think, in June 2013 at MET 30199917. We've got a page 10, please, of that document. We have a diagram. This is a document I think you compiled, isn't it?
Yes.
Let's just look at this diagram. You can see the date at the bottom left-hand corner, 12th of September 2017. That's obviously after the fire. What is the relevance of that date?
There wouldn't have been any for that, as I wasn't there at the time.
That may very well, therefore, be just an exhibit mark. If we go to page, well, staying on this page, you can see that from the left-hand side, you've got 6 approved fabricators and Taylor Maxwell, and in the middle, RB Arc UK. Is that Reynobond Architecture UK? Yes. Then all projects and details recorded in CRM. That's a database, details for projects, isn't it?
That's right.
That data. And then on the right-hand side, architects and investors, CPD presentation specifications, main contractors, cladding installers. What was the significance of architects and investors there?
So that was basically we were looking at trying to promote Reynobond through architects,
Right.
get specifications.
And
And
what,
that was with doing CPD presentations and developing specifications with them.
and what about main contractors?
I can't remember why that was on there, but we would have been having contact. So through those approved fabricators and other people on there, we would have been having some contact with main contractors on specific projects. And I had some contact, not much, probably one, maybe two with cladding installers, but very, very rare with cladding installers.
And then if we go to page 3 of this document, we can see that it's entitled Renault Bond, Renault Lux, Business Case, Strategy, Objectives, Actions, Route to Market and Why is the second bullet point down, Taylor Maxwell Fabricators, Architects and Main Contractors and Supply Agreements. See that?
Yes.
Does that tell us that your main market were fabricators, but also architects and main contractors?
Yes, we were getting involved with some main contractors due to a specific main contractor through fabricators.
Now, if you go, and I should have shown you this, and I'm sorry, back to page 2 of this document, you can see that it's dated June 2013. I did say that it was. That's where we see it. Sales meeting June 2013. So does that tell us, tell me if this is wrong, that at that time at least, June 2013, you regarded your principal customer base as fabricators, but also architects, cladding contractors and main contractors, perhaps to a lesser extent?
Yeah, the main was fabricators and architects. As I say, with the main contractor, there was one specific contractor that we were working with, which was to do with some general housing that they were dealing with. So,
in very simple terms, do we take it from that your customer base, we've been talking a lot about your customers or customer base, comprise fabricators and some architects?
Yes.
Thank you. Now, if we go back to your statement, your first statement, please, we were on MET 019063, please. Can we go to page 3, paragraph 10? We were there. That's it. And you say one of the fabrication companies, if we can just expand that, thank you. One of the fabrication companies with whom I had established a good working relationship and who had generated a number of opportunities for Arconic was CEP Architectural Facades Limited, CEP. You go on to say that Jeff Blades of CEP contacted you about supplying to the Grenfell Tower project. Did you have an existing relationship with Jeff Blades before this time, early 2013?
Yes, we'd done a number of, we'd done possibly some work with CEP before that, yes.
Jeff Blades, when he gave his evidence, this is day 41, page 31, lines 23 to 25, describe your relationship as a professional business working relationship. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I would.
You agree that it was an informal relationship, but one of trust, yes?
We had a professional relationship.
Yes. I'm not suggesting anything untoward. I'm just asking you, is he right to say that it was an informal relationship and one of trust?
Yes, we worked well together, yes.
Now, Mr. Blades told us that he didn't think that CEP would get favourable deals from Arconic by virtue of that relationship. Is he right about that?
Yes, he's right.
You say in your second witness statement that your introduction to the Grenfell Tower project was in October 2012. And Mr. Blades' evidence is that he introduced you to the project. And for our purposes, that's day 41, page 85, lines 15 to 21. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe so.
And he also told us that he introduced you because he was aware that Studio E was interested in zinc products and Renault Bond could be supplied in zinc or with a zinc finish. Is that right?
Yes.
Were you told in advance that the architect was looking for zinc products, I say in advance, before you met Studio E?
I knew we were going in to talk about ACM. I can't recall whether it was specifically about ZCM, zinc material.
Jeff Blades also told us, and this is day 41, page 86 to 89, lines 3 to 6, that CEP did not work with solid zinc or ZCM. Is that right?
That's my understanding. They hadn't, yes.
They haven't. So does that mean that if you were going to supply CEP, or going to supply a project using CEP as your fabricator, it would rule out using zinc or ZCM altogether?
No, there's no reason why they couldn't have. The fact they hadn't dealt with it before wouldn't have been any reason for them not to have been fabricating it at some point.
Right. Could Arconic supply solid zinc?
Not solid zinc, no. Only ZCM.
That was the only zinc metal product that you could supply, ZCM, is that right?
Yes.
And Arconic, I think, could also supply zinc, as you told us yesterday, zinc patina, ACM. So ACM coated to look like zinc.
Yes.
And I think it's right, CEP would be happy to work with zinc patina ACM because it was ACM and not ZCM.
I don't recall having those exact conversations with them, but there's no reason why they couldn't have fabricated ZCM or used the zinc painted look.
Right.
ACM.
Do you remember at that time, October 2012, or indeed early 2013, who the main contractor on the Grenfell Tower project was?
I remember at the very first meeting that there was a main contractor, Leadbitters, at that meeting, but that was my only knowledge of main contractors that were involved.
Do you remember whether you brought product literature, a hard copy of product literature, with you to that meeting?
I don't recall specifically.
Do you remember discussing natural solid zinc at that meeting?
I recall talking about ZCM.
You did. You talked about ZCM, did you?
We talked about ZCM and possibly other ACM materials as well.
Did you talk about zinc patina ACM?
It would have been in the brochure if I'd have left a brochure. I don't recall whether I specifically spoke about Z patina.
Mr. Blades' recollection, and again, day 41, page 88, line 16, was that you discussed at that meeting, you discussed options where you could offer paint finish to replicate zinc. Is that right?
Yeah, I don't recall it myself.
You also say you also discussed ZCM.
Yes.
Was there what about the arrangement with Umicore at that time?
We were being encouraged to sell ZCM and not the zinc patina because of an arrangement that had been drawn up between Umicore, who was supplying Alcoa the natural zinc skin to produce the ZCM. So we were being encouraged not to sell the painted zinc material.
Why did you discuss zinc patina finished ACM given the Umicore arrangement at that time?
I don't recall specifically why.
Did you discuss anything about the fire performance, either of ZCM or zinc patina finished ACM at that meeting?
No, I don't recall.
Did you mention the different core? The fact that ZCM had an FR core, invariably, whereas ACM could have either a PE core or an FR core. Did that topic?
No, I don't recall.
Did you discuss core at all at that meeting?
No, I don't recall doing so.
Did you discuss the price of ZCM at that meeting?
No, wouldn't have done.
ZCM was substantially more expensive, wasn't it, than ACM?
Yeah, but that wouldn't have been for me to discuss that with in front of an architect. With the fabricator would have done that through the right channels.
How hard did you push ZCM? Do you remember in those early meetings? At that early meeting?
It wasn't for me to try and persuade a customer either way. We had a range of materials and I would present that range of materials, and it would have been up to them to decide what they wanted.
Can you give us an idea of the, well, let me just ask you this, put it this way to you. Can I ask you to look at Claude Schmidt's second witness statement? Mr. Chairman, I know the time. This is probably, given this about a 5-minute line of questions, but there's some dipping into some evidence. It's as convenient a moment as ever, but we are on the same topic.
Well, if it's a convenient point, let's break there. If you would rather just continue for 5 minutes or a little longer, I'm quite happy with that.
If we can do that, I'd be very grateful.
Yes, all right.
Thank you very much. Ms. French, can I ask you please to be shown Claude Schmidt's second witness statement at page 13. That's MET 53187, page 13 of paragraph 37. He says in that statement at 37, with regard to the prices of ZCM and ACM-FR in comparison to ACM 55PE around the time of the refurbishment of Grenfell Tower, these were as follows. ZCM around €8.80 per square metre, ACM-FR around €28 per square metre, ACM-PE around €26 per square metre. So on this basis, on this evidence from Mr. Schmidt, ZCM was more than 3 times the cost of ACM-PE. Does that accord with your recollection?
Yes, it was more expensive.
Now, he also tells us about Arconic's profit margin. If we can go to page 13 of this statement, at paragraph 38, just below it, he says, or stay on this page, look just below it, he says, so far as profit margins on ZCM, ACM-FR and ACM-55PE products at the onset and during the refurbishment of Grenfell Tower are concerned, these were as follows. ZCM around €30 to 40 per square metre, ACM-FR around €5 to 6 per square metre, ACM-PE around €7 to 8 per square metre. Now, according to Claude Schmidt, therefore, it looks as if PE makes around €2 more per square metre than FR called ACM. Would that, again, would that correspond with your recollection?
I was not ever party to any of the profit that they were making on any of the products. The only information I was working on was the overall square metre price to the customer. I was not party to any of that.
You didn't know which was the more profitable of the products in the range you were selling, is that?
No, definitely not.
Right. It looks from this as if ZCM makes by far the most profit. Do I take it, though, from what you're telling us, that you didn't know that?
No, I definitely didn't know that.
Were you ever encouraged to sell PE over FR?
No.
Mr. Chairman, that I think is a convenient moment.
Yes, very well. Well, Ms. French will have a break at that point. Please remember not to talk to anyone about your evidence or anything to do with it while we have the break. And we'll resume at 25 to 12, please. All right? We'll see you then. Thank you very much. Welcome back, everyone. I'm going to go next to Miss French to check that she's back with us. Hello, Miss French, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you, sir.
And you can hear me and see me plainly, I hope.
Yes, thank you.
And you're ready to carry on?
Yes, I am.
So I shall ask Mr. Millett to continue his questioning. Yes, Mr. Millett.
Mr. Chairman, welcome back, Ms. French. I just want to explore a little bit more with you, if I can, the topic of ZCM. You told us before that Arconic had an arrangement with Umicore by which you were obliged to promote ZCM, in other words, solid zinc panels.
Yes.
Yes. Could we look at exhibit DF4 at MET 30's19919, please? This is one of your exhibits, and at if you go to the next page, this is the first page of the exhibit. If you go to page 2, you can see that this is a list of samples provided for the Grenfell Tower project. I think you put this together when, is this right, when you were preparing your witness statements? Sorry.
I didn't put it together. It was put together by the solicitors.
Right. And am I right in thinking that this was a list of samples that you historically had provided to Studio E when you were involved?
Yes, it was.
Yes. Now, if we look down that list, and it's chronological, 2013, 14, and below that, 2014, right through that year, you can see that there are a large number of samples provided. But if you look at that down that list and take your time, if you can just look at, first of all, what's on the page in front of you, or screen in front of you there, is any of those ZCM?
No.
If we look at the bottom half of the page then, is any of those ZCM?
No. Yes, sorry, Renabon zinc. No.
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 So can you explain why you never provided any samples of ZCM, notwithstanding your arrangement with Umicore that you were obliged to promote ZCM?
No, I don't recall.
Right. Do you remember whether you brought samples with you to the October 2012 meeting?
No, I don't remember.
You don't remember?
No, I don't remember.
Do you remember whether you took any particular samples, or you just don't remember one way or the other?
I can't remember what I took with me on that particular meeting.
Can we look at your first witness statement, page 4, please? I'd like to look with you at paragraph 11. You're talking here, and I'll wait for it to come up so you can see it, about the correspondence in late March 2013. And if you look 5 lines down in that paragraph, you say, in relation to the zinc pattern at ACM, I believe we must have spoken to Umicore regarding providing this colour ACM so as not to have been acting against our arrangement with them. I was not, however, involved in these discussions. Now, to be fair to you, it does appear that you did attempt to introduce Umicore to the project. And if we can just look at that, it's at CEP 6014. This is an email chain from October 2012, where you can see that Jonathan Lowy of Umicore writes to you, or copies to you. He writes to Studio E, Adrian, that's Adrian Jess, we believe, on the 16th of October 2012, copied to you. Adrian, Debbie French and Rainer have asked me to contact you regarding our pre-weathered zinc. She thought that it may be useful for you to see some photos of a project completed 5 years ago, also in London, City Quarter by Berkeley Homes in Leman Street. He sends photographs, and you respond, if you are scrolled up that page, you respond on the 18th of October to him. Hi, Jonathan. Many thanks for sending these pictures over to Studio E. My approved Rainobond fabricator, CEP Facades, are working closely with this project and introduced Rainobond ZCM to the architect. I've copied Jeff into this email so he can be kept in the loop. So it looks from this, is it right that you had in fact introduced Rainobond ZCM, in other words, with zinc as opposed to zinc finish, to Studio E?
Again, I can't remember the specific conversations, but yes.
We haven't seen any emails where anybody from Umicore actually gave permission to sell zinc patina ACM in place of ZCM, properly so called. Do you remember any emails of that nature?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yes. We haven't seen any emails where anybody from Umicore gave permission to Rainobond and to Arconic to sell zinc patina ACM as opposed to pure zinc. Did you see any of that nature at the time?
No, I don't recall the details of that.
Do you know, or can you remember who it was who gave permission or sought permission? Who at Arconic sought permission to use that material?
To use the ZCM?
To use ACM with a patina finish?
No, I don't.
Can we go to your first witness statement again, please, at page 4, paragraph 14. And you say there, I was asked to provide some indicative pricing. You see, I was asked to provide some indicative pricing for the supply of ZCM, which is an FR product of a volume of approximately 5,000 square meters. I cannot now remember whether I provided a formal quotation or written estimate. And I do recall that soon after I provided the price, I was told, I think by Jeff Blades, that we were too expensive. And is it right that at that stage, you thought you'd lost the Grenfell Tower project?
I believe so, yes.
And was that because, in your view, ZCM was too expensive?
I can't recall, but yes, I believe so.
Right. Was there any part of that thinking related to the fact that, as Jeff Blades told us in his evidence, CEP did not work with or had never worked with ZCM?
I don't believe that would have been a reason for it, no.
Right. Were you still hopeful at that time that CEP would still promote Rainobond products, including perhaps zinc patina ACM?
On this particular project? I don't recall what I would have thought at the time. If it would have been down to the customer to decide what they wanted, it wasn't for us to try and maneuver them down any particular route. It would have been up to them to decide. Right.
And in fact, it's right, isn't it, that even as early as late March 2013, you were supplying samples of zinc patina ACM to Studio E, weren't you?
Yes.
Yes. Can we then turn to 2013 proper? I've taken the chronology slightly out of order, I'm afraid, but I want to try to stay, if I can, with the events in those early days of the Grenfell Tower refurbishment, rolling back the clock a little bit to the very beginning of 2013. So that's where we are in the chronology. Can we look at CEP 3048975, please? And this is a run of emails in early 2013, January 2013. If we look at the second email down, this is an email from Mohit Kotecha of Leadbitter to Jeff Blades on the 24th of January 2013. And it's said to be email of one of two. And it says, Jeff, nice to meet you today at the baseline offices to review the Grenfell Tower project with Gareth and myself. As discussed, please find attached all necessary details for CEP Architectural to produce a design, manufacture and supply price along with installation costs from your approved installer high-rise solutions. And we can see that this was forwarded to you. If you look at a little bit higher up the page, this was forwarded to you by Jeff Blades a little bit later on the same day, 24th of January 2014. Now, take it from me that we have seen that attached to this email from Mr. Kotecha to Mr. Blades was a bundle of documents. And I'll just give the reference. It's CEP 3048977. There's no need to go to those. If we go to, that's the email itself. If we go to the bundle, it's CEP 3048978. This is what gets sent. We don't need to see the covering email, but this is what gets sent. And this is a specification. Outline specification for the rain screen cladding. And if we go to page 10 of this document, you will see that here is an early drawing of the overclad tower. When you received the email that Mr. Kotecha had sent to Mr. Blades, and Mr. Blades had forwarded to you on the 24th of January 2013, did you open the bundle of documents and look at this document?
I don't recall whether I did or didn't.
Also attached to his email and forwarded to you is CEP 3048979. This is another bundle of documents. And if we go to page 3 in that, please, we can see that this is a picture of the tower before refurbishment. You say you didn't look at these, I think. In your statement, you say you don't recall receiving these emails and you don't know if you ever looked at the attachments.
No, I don't recall whether I did or didn't.
It's right, isn't it, that you were asked to quote for the project at about this time, weren't you?
I don't recall the details of the date that we were first asked to produce a price.
Right. Well, you had a meeting, I think, with Studio E in March 2013, didn't you?
Yes.
That's a couple of months later than this document. But when you had that meeting, did you look back at this email that you'd got from Mr. Kotecha in January and the bundle he'd sent you about the project?
A lot of those details on there wouldn't have been necessarily relevant to me. That would have been down to the we were basically providing a larger flat material that other people would have been cutting down and installing. So I wouldn't necessarily have looked over those details in great detail, but I don't recall whether I did or didn't open them.
Right. You don't recall whether you did or didn't open them. Can we proceed on the basis that because Mr. Blades was sending you this information for this project, at the very least at the time, this was information that he thought was important to you, you would have realised that?
Yes.
Is there any reason you can think of why you wouldn't have looked at these documents?
Because, as I say, we were providing the build-up of that of any project it wasn't relevant to what I was actually doing. We were supplying a product that would have then been cut down by others, it would have been designed by others, and it would have been installed onto a building by others. So all of those details, again, technically, I wouldn't have had an awful lot of knowledge about what those drawings meant, what they involved, or how specific or non-specific they were.
No, that's fair enough. I'm really just asking you whether you looked at these at the time. You say you can't remember. Did you look at them in preparation for the sales meeting that you had at the end of March, 2 months later?
I don't recall.
Let's look at your statement, paragraph 72, please, on page 21. Your second witness statement. Paragraph 72 on page 21. You say there, that I have also recently, again by virtue of disclosure, seen that on the 24th of January 2013, Mr. Jeff Blades, CEP, forwarded me, copied to Mr. Neil Wilson, CEP, 2 emails that he'd received from Mr. Kotecha of Leadbitter. I do not recall receiving these emails, and I do not know if I ever looked at the attachments. I'm looking at the emails again now. I also note that they do not ask me to provide further information or respond, etc. I've been asked to describe what the attachments are and what they show. I can see that the emails include 12 attachments, which I would describe as artistic renderings of what Grenfell Tower might look like after completion of the works, along with technical architectural drawings, some showing the building as a whole and others showing cross sections. They include information such as the amount of area to be covered by the cladding and technical drawings of the window installation. This was very early in the project, and I'm not sure that the documents would have been directly relevant for my purposes. I had no technical knowledge and did not get involved in the design of projects, and therefore cannot explain in technical detail the drawings or what they show. Indeed, it was common for me to have very limited details about a project. Copies of these emails and attachments appear from page 327 of DF5. Do you accept that at the very least what these show is that Grenfell Tower was a tall building?
Yes.
And that you noticed that it was a tall building, a high-rise building?
Yes.
Can we then look back at your statement at paragraph 73, which is the next paragraph down in the same statement? And you say there, I've been asked to confirm whether I knew if the building was taller than 18 meters and the extent of the cladding works. I do not recall ever thinking about the height of the building or the extent of the cladding. As far as I was concerned at the time, the product had a BBA certificate which referred to National Class 0. Now, can we take that statement there in your statement as confirming that you understood at the time, you understood the regulations in the UK at the time sufficiently to know that as long as the product you were supplying had Class 0, you could sell it for any height of building, including Grenfell Tower being a high building?
Yes.
Does that tell us that you knew at the time that it was important that Reynobond PE 55 had achieved a Class 0 fire classification, because without it, you couldn't sell it for use on a tall building such as Grenfell Tower?
I don't recall thinking of it or understanding it in that detail.
To be clear, is it because you knew or perhaps thought, let's say thought, that RB Reynobond 55 PE had achieved Class 0, that you didn't concern yourself with the height of the building?
No, as I say, other people had all the details as well, and would have been able to make those judgment calls as well.
Yes. Well, I'm just asking about your thinking, you see, because in your statement you say you don't recall thinking about the height of the building or the extent of the cladding, because as far as I was concerned at the time, the product had a BBA certificate which referred to National Class 0. What I'm just trying to understand is your thought process. Was your thought process that because it had Class 0, you didn't have to think about the height of the building at all? Or did you think because it's Class 0, even though it's a tall building, it can be used?
Basically, it was that I didn't really think about any product, any building in terms of its height or its overall design. We had a BBA document, and my understanding was that it was covered by the necessary regulations.
But let me try and get it in a different way. You saw that the Grenfell Tower was a tall building. When you saw that it was a tall building, was your thought process, well, that's all right, because Reynobond PE 55 has got a Class 0, so I can supply it?
I'm honestly not sure that I would have even thought that at the time. It would have been that it got a classification, we had a BBA document, and that was enough.
Did you have any understanding about the relationship, or about whether there was a relationship between Class 0 on the one hand and the height of the building on which Reynobond PE 55 could be used on the other?
No.
Now, between March and April 2013, I think it's right, isn't it, that you sent samples to Studio E? We saw that list that you'd compiled. That's correct, isn't it?
Yes.
Now, in her evidence, Gwenaëlle Derandanger says that, this is paragraph 29 of her statement, that samples are A4 size or smaller. Is that right?
Yes, there were a couple of different sizes, A4 or A3, maybe slightly smaller than an A3.
Right. And they're supplied purely for aesthetic purposes.
Yes.
And is it right that Arconic, as she says, produce ACM to order? And when Arconic produces ACM to order, additional sheets are made up and cut up into sample sizes. And that's how samples are generated.
That's right.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. She also says that because of that method of production, Arconic doesn't pay any attention to the core of the sample. Samples are for colour and finish only. Is she right about that?
Yes.
Did, to the best of your understanding, did your customers understand that that was the purpose of your sending them samples?
I believe so, yes. We were never asked any questions about the core on any samples provided. It was always to do with the aesthetics.
So does that follow from that you never discussed the core of samples that you were sending your customers?
From my recollection, no.
I'd like to turn then to a topic about internal records within an Arconic about the Grenfell Tower project, if I may. Now, in your first witness statement, you say that you had a meeting with Studio E on the 4th of March 2013. That's paragraph 10. I can take you back to it if you like, but do you remember that?
Yes.
If we look at your first statement in the same place, you also said on the 11th of March, you confirmed the entry onto the Arconic CRM program showing CEP as the potential customer for Grenfell Tower, with Jeff Blaze as the potential customer. In fact, it's come up on the screen for your convenience, so you can see there. Do you see? You say in the last few lines.
Yes.
Yes. CRM, does that stand for Customer Relationship Management?
Yes.
And what, can you just explain to us, what is that? Is it a database?
Yes, in effect, it was just a main portal for information to be stored about projects, customers, and other details. Samples were ordered through that CRM system at a later stage as well.
If we go to the entry in the CRM that you refer to, I think we find that at MET 30199920, page 5. Can we go to that? This is dated the 11th of March 2013, and it comes from do not reply at crmondemand.com, 11th of March 2013 to Gwenaëlle Derandanger. Task Grenfell Tower is submitted. And just help me with this. Is this an automated email from the CRM system?
Yes.
What would prompt it to go?
That they'd sent that they'd shipped samples out to satisfy the request that had been put into the system.
Right. And do I understand it this way, that you would make an entry onto the CRM about the project and what was needed, and that would then automatically email Gwenaëlle Derandanger, or perhaps the inside sales team, about what was needed?
I believe the requests went direct to somebody else within Merksheim for them to pull together the necessary sample and send it out. So either myself or Gwen would raise the request for samples.
I see. If we look at the substance of the email that's sent, just go back to that, please. It says order, ship, brochures, samples, Gwenaëlle Derandanger, task information, Grenfell Tower. Normal, Arconic contact, Deborah French, that's 1, contact 2, Durand Danger. Account information, CEP Architectural Facades. Contact information, Jeff Blades, English. Does that reflect an entry that you had made yourself onto the CRM?
Yeah, it could very well be from me. I don't know can't remember whether it would have been from me or whether it would have been put in there by Gwen. As I say, we would have both had access to that and do that, depending on where the request came from.
Does the existence of this email tell us that the Grenfell Tower project had actually been entered onto the CRM database at this time or by this time?
Yes.
This is the 11th of March 2013. Yes. And what was the significance of the entry of the Grenfell Tower project onto the CRM database?
We had to put everything that we were working on into the CRM and start to build up a sort of knowledge of the project and the details of projects, so we could track samples and other information. Right.
Can we then look back at your first witness statement at page 5, please? Go to paragraph 16. And you say there, I cannot recall any further activity or exchanges for the rest of 2013, although I note on page 1 of DF3 that on 18th of October 2013, I created a new CRM program entry for the Grenfell Tower project. This CRM document shows Leadbitters as a potential party and the product identified as ACMRB painted. This would be PE or FR, and ZCMRB, this was FR. Now, is that your recollection that there was a new CRM program entry for Grenfell Tower project in October 2013?
I don't recall that. I've just seen the email that you've just shown me.
Well, the one I showed you was March 2013, and what I was just interested to know is what happened to the March entry onto the CRM, if the one in October was, as you call it, a new entry.
I don't know, I can't recall.
Can we look at your Exhibit 3, which you refer to, MET 3019918, at page 2, please? You can see that this is an entry onto the CRM, and you can see the date, 18th of March, sorry, 18th of October 2000, perhaps that's not the right date. Yes, it's the bottom right-hand corner of this document. Which, under sales detailed information, I think you've got to scroll down a little bit further. Yes, in the top right of your screen in front of you, it says created external Deborah French, 18th of October 2013. That's the date I think you get in your statement. Do you see that?
Yes.
That's did you make this entry at that time?
Yes, possibly.
And if we look under project address, which you will see just a little bit above that in the page. Can you see it says project address? Just yep. Above that, it says type of building, residential, type of market, public. Does that tell us that at this time, October 2013, you knew that the Grenfell Tower project was a residential building and that it was part of public housing?
Yes.
Yes. Can I then turn to another document, which is your Exhibit DF1 at MET 3019920 at page 31. This is earlier in the year, 2013. It looks like an automatically generated email dated the 5th of April 2013 and again sent to Grenfell Tower Inquiry. And you can see underneath that the text, objet Grenfell Tower, client, Studio E, contact Blaine Cagney, utilisation, I'm sorry, it's in French, Renabond 55, mode de transformation, cassettes. Do you see that? Format A6. Now, do you remember making this entry yourself?
No, that looking at the very top, that's where it says from, that's something that would have been generated by Gwen, I believe.
Right, but how would she have known to generate these details unless she had had direct contact with Studio E?
There could have been an email in direct requesting that, or it could have been that I forwarded it on and she raised it in the CRM system.
Right. Do you remember whether she ever had direct contact with Studio E?
I don't recall, no.
Is it, I mean, I don't want you to speculate, but doing the best you can with your recollection, is it right that in fact those details came from you?
Again, it could have been an email that was sent in to both myself and Gwen, and that she's picked it up and entered it into the CRM system, or it could have been that I'd phoned her and asked her to do it. I really can't recall.
Do you recall whether there had been any discussions about using cassette in particular at this time, April 2013?
No, I don't recall.
Can you explain why mode de transformation is cassette as opposed to cassette or rivet, or even just rivet?
No, I don't know.
Now, looking at the format A6, does that suggest that this was actually about a sample?
Yes, it would have been a smaller sample.
Right. I'm now going to turn to a different topic also within 2013, which is the UAE fires in late 2012 and early 2013. Now, in this next section, I ought to give a trigger warning. We may be showing pictures of fires in tall buildings. We saw one or two earlier, but I just ought to say that. Can we start by going to Claude Schmidt's Exhibit 10? MET 30's53157. I just want to see what you know about this. This is MET 30's 53157 at page 32. Page 32 of this exhibit. Yes, and at the very bottom of the page, there on the screen in front of you, you can see the start of an article entitled "Cladding Blamed in Skyscraper Fire," Monday, November 26, 2012. And over the page at page 33, you can see the substantive start of the article and an embedded video with a picture of a tower on fire. We can't play, and I'm not going to play the video, but you can see the caption underneath it. And it says, "The fire at Tamwheel Tower started near the top of the building and moved down, raining down flaming pieces of the building onto the ground." This is November 2013. Did you know at that time that there had been a cladding fire at the Tamwheel Tower, which was in Dubai on the 20th of November 2012?
I recall there being a fire of some description in the UAE, but I didn't know the details or had no further information or knowledge of it.
Right. So do we take it from that you didn't know about this specific fire?
No, not the specific details, no.
Do you remember any discussion within Arconic, either with Peter Froelich or with Claude Vale or anybody else in those departments, about the fact of a high-rise fire in a tall building in Dubai at that time, November 2012?
No, I wouldn't have been party to any of those discussions. As I say, I visited the factory very rarely and certainly wouldn't have been involved or even heard discussions going on in Merksheim.
There was another fire in April 2013 at the Al Hafit Tower in the UAE. And that was on the 22nd of April 2013. Do you remember that fire?
No, as I say, I recall a fire in the UAE, but I couldn't begin to tell you what the details were, when it was, or what the project details were.
Right. Well, let's see how far we go with the next document then, which is one of Claude Vale's exhibits, part 10, page 157, and that is MET30 53158_P10 at page 157. Now, this is an email from Richard Geeta of 3A to Barry Wingrove, dated the 9th of May 2013. Now, we understand that Richard Geeta was the sales representative in the UK for Aluko Bond, 3A's product. Are you able to confirm that?
Yes, I believe he was.
Yes. And he was effectively your direct competition. Is that fair? If we scroll up very briefly to the bottom of page 156, we can see that this email was passed on in turn, you see, by Barry Wingrove to a number of people on the 9th of May, and copied to you. Do you see your name at the very bottom there, CC? Yeah. And then just following the email up a little bit further on page 156, we can see that you, if we just scroll down a little bit, you sent that email on the 10th of May 2013 to Peter Froelich, Claude Vale, Alan Flacon and Claude Schmidt. Morning all, just to make you aware, I sent this link over to Claude W last week concerning a BBC report covering a fire in UAE using ACM. Richard Geeta, Aluko Bond rep in the UK, is emailing all fabricators explaining that Aluko Bond is now using a fire core only as standard. And then you embed the link into your email. And then you go on to say, would welcome any comments, stroke statement we have, ref fire and our standards so I can communicate this to our relevant customers. And I've shown you that, and I want just to go back now, if I can, to the email that Barry Wingrove sent. Can I just ask you, Barry Wingrove, he has an Argonaut UK email address. Who was Barry Wingrove? Do you remember?
He was a fabricator. He
was a fabricator, right. Now, Jeff Blades also told us that he had received an email from Richard Geeta at about this time concerning this fire. Were you aware whether Richard Geeta of 3A was sending an email about this fire to other fabricators like CEP, or did you not know?
I can't recall the instance of that happening, but he obviously sent it to a number of people looking at that.
Let's look then at the email he sends to Barry Wingrove, which gets passed to you and you pass on within Arconic up the chain. And he starts by saying, hi Barry, you may or may not have seen the recent press coverage of a building fire in Dubai clad in ACM. He then goes on to say, after the link, having taken the time to investigate with my colleague responsible for this market, he has responded as follows. And then if we can see the response, which is all in italics. If you go to the third paragraph of the italics, well, first of all, I should ask you, when you got this email and then passed it up the chain, did you read it?
Yes, I probably did at the time, but again, I don't recall it. It's a long time ago.
No, I understand that, but I just want to confirm that
I wouldn't have not read it. No.
Right. Okay. Can we then go to the third paragraph in the italics? It says, the trouble is that the cladding system here in particular, but all over in general using PE, is like a chimney which transports the fire from bottom to top or vice versa within shortest time. And then if you look at the fourth paragraph, he says, the worst of all, in our field, you see, the worst of all, in our field of composite panels and then capital letters, you do not get what you see, 2 exclamation marks. And then he goes on, the mulch holding Alubond people are responsible for the huge damage in this part of the world. They, since a very long time, promote fire, quotes, rated, unquotes, composite panels with a white core, which, when being tested, turns out to be a recycled PE core burning like paper. Half of the country is full of this rubbish due to price. We have taken random samples and done a live test in Bangkok in front of architects. They almost fainted. Indeed, this panel is a whole sheet and burns fiercely. Did you read that message specifically?
As I say, I'm pretty sure I would have done, but I don't recall reading it or even recognise it now.
Would it be right to conclude from the fact that you sent it on up the chain to senior people in Arconic that you regarded it as an important message?
Yes.
Were you shocked by what Barry Wingrove was passing on to you from his colleague?
I don't recall, I can't remember what my response would have been, but as I say, having passed it on up, I was obviously concerned about it.
Did you appreciate that there was a view, at least expressed in this email, that a ventilated facade with a polyethylene cord panel could transport fire up a building like a chimney, as he says?
I probably wouldn't have taken that element on board, not being having any knowledge of design.
Did you note his view or observation that the recycled PE burns like paper?
I don't recall.
And what about the observation that architects, when shown a live test, almost fainted?
Again, I don't recall the specifics in that.
Right. Really, I'm just trying to get a feel for your reaction when you saw this email for the first time. Did it occur to you at that moment that PE called ACM was not fire safe?
Again, I can't comment on how I would have felt. I've obviously sent it to Merksheim for a reason, and would have expected them to, comment as appropriate. And if it was affecting what we were doing here, then I would have had the necessary information.
Did it occur to you from reading this that PE called ACM might be dangerous?
Probably not. No. It would have been relevant to the BBA document. If anything was altering, then I would have been notified about that.
Did you note Mr. Gita's comment after the end of the italics? Well, actually, to be fair to you, I'm not sure I've shown you those yet. Let's scroll down a little bit if we can. I haven't. Let me show you that. After the end of the italics, if you scroll down on page 157. Shown, if the witness could be shown 157. After the italics, which are the quotations, Mr. Gita says, again, the perils of using cheap ACM alternatives have been exposed. As you are aware, our standard core is the plus FR mineral core, achieving class B S1D0, according to EN 13501 part 1, unlike other ACM producers. Now, I'm assuming that since you read this email and passed it on, you would have read that sentence.
Possibly, yes.
When you did read that sentence, did it occur to you that your competitor, Mr. Gita at 3A, regarded the European classifications as relevant?
I wouldn't have taken that on board. As I say, my knowledge, I didn't have enough knowledge in those areas. I would have sent that on for other people to be guiding us to what, whether the materials we've got were suitable or not.
Did it not occur to you at the time that given what you've told us about your view about the relevance of the European fire classifications, did you not ask yourself or wonder why it was that Mr. Gita was referring to them, given that you were competing in the same market?
No.
Right. When he says that the perils of using cheap ACM have been exposed, did that not cause you some concern or surprise?
Again, I can't comment because I can't remember how I reacted at the time. Right.
Did you note the fact that 3A's standard product was an FR product?
I knew at the time that their product had been changed to an FR.
Did you wonder why yours hadn't?
again, I was being guided by Merck's. If they thought it was relevant, then that's what they would have provided us.
Do you know from your own recollection whether Aluco bond 3A, that is, stopped selling PE called Aluco bond at this time?
I don't recall.
Did you have any thoughts about whether perhaps Arconic should stop selling PE core and offer FR as standard in all regions at this time?
Again, I can't recall in 2013 whether I did or didn't.
Right. Can we look up then to well, we've seen page 156 and the email that you forwarded on the 10th of May. You say in your statement that you sent this, and I just want to show you what you say on page 156, if we can just scroll up to that. I've shown you the text there. You link the story, or rather the topic which Mr. Geeta is passing on to you, to a link that you'd already sent to Claude Vale the previous week concerning the BBC report covering a fire in the UAE using ACM. So do we take it from that even before Mr. Geeta's message to Mr. Wingrove and that coming to you, even before that, you were aware of this fire and thought it appropriate to discuss it with Mr. Vale?
Yes.
Do you remember what you said to Mr. Vale about it at the time?
No, I don't.
What was the purpose of your bringing that fire to Mr. Vale's attention, even before you'd seen the Geeta message?
It was possibly because of some questions that were coming from some UK customers.
Do you remember receiving questions from UK customers about this fire?
I remember, I think it was related to that particular fire. I remember receiving one or possibly two emails from customers about it.
Do you remember which customers?
I believe I had an email from Simco over that.
And anybody else?
I don't recall any others.
Right. And what was the nature of the query? Can you recall?
I think it was just, again, highlighting that there had been some fires and just alerting me to them, or making me aware of them.
And what did you want Mr. Vale to do?
I don't recall what I was thinking at the time, where it was possibly some reassurances that everything we were doing was okay and I was okay to carry on.
Did Mr. Vale respond to your message that we could see here that you sent him the previous week?
I don't recall specifically whether he did or didn't.
In passing these messages or this email up the chain to seniors at Arconic, you were obviously bringing it to their attention because you thought it was important, as you told us. Were you looking to them to give you lines of communication that you could give to customers who called in and asked about it?
Yes, I was obviously needing some sort of reassurance that I was okay to carry on as I was and be told differently otherwise. Did
anybody from the group of people to whom you sent this email respond to you?
I don't recall specifically if they did or didn't.
So you don't remember whether anyone told you what to tell customers?
I'm sure I would have had a response, but I can't remember specifically what it was, what that communication was, or what it involved.
Do you remember the gist, the flavour of what you were told to say to customers in response to this event?
Again, I can't remember specifically.
Do you remember that you sent an email to fabricators on the 13th of May 2013?
Yes.
3 days later. We find that at MET 30 53173 at page 79. If we can go to that, please. Now, this is an email from you, dated, as we can see, the 13th of May 2013, to Graham Smith and John Simmons at Simcoe, copied to Claude Vale and Peter Froelich. Subject, BBC report, ref ACM in UAE. And if we could just have that on the left-hand side of the screen and pull up the identical version that it appears you also sent to CEP the same day. That's at CEP 3049719, please. We can see, just looking at the right-hand side, you sent this one the same day and around about the same time, but in fact 2 minutes later, on the morning of the 13th of May, to CEP. And it looks as if, but you can confirm, that the text is exactly the same.
Yes, it is.
It is. We can work with either of these emails, it doesn't matter which. Let's go with the first one I put up, which is the one to Graham Smith and John Simmons. As I've shown you, you can see that Claude Vale and Peter Froelich were copied. Peter Froelich, in his evidence, says that he spoke to you about the contents of this email that you sent. And he says that at paragraph 57.1.2 of his statement at page 20, just for our reference. Can you confirm, from your recollection, that Peter Froelich did speak to you about the contents of this email?
I can't recollect that exactly, but I wouldn't have put that sort of information together without having some sort of guidance from Merksheim.
Right. Did you draft this email yourself?
I don't recall whether I did or didn't, or whether it was a combination of some wording from Merksheim and me adding stuff in. I can't recall.
Right. Do you remember who was involved in pulling together the text of this email, apart from you and possibly Peter Froelich?
No, I don't. I would have said that if I've copied in Claude and Peter, then it would have been those two. Sorry.
No, sorry, do you want to finish your answer?
I don't know whether that would have then gone up from them up further. I don't know.
We can see from those two examples on the screen that you sent one to Simcoe and another to CEP. Was this a general round robin that you were sending to all of your small group of fabricators?
If I've sent it to those two and done it straight away, then yes, I could very well have been sending it to the key fabricators that we were working with.
Did anybody tell you to whom to send this email?
No, they wouldn't necessarily have done that.
Right, so whose idea was it to send it to these two fabricators, or the fabricators in general?
That would have probably been guided by me, because I obviously know the customers that were asking the relevant questions.
Right. We've seen that Claude Vale was copied into the version on the left, the one that went into Simcoe, although it doesn't appear that he was copied into the one on the right. Is it fair to say, to the best of your recollection, that Claude Vale knew what you were saying to customers?
Yes.
And that he approved it?
He would have been aware of it, yeah, yes.
Yes. Now, did you consider sending this email to end customers? For example, Studio E, with whom you had meetings on the Grenfell Tower project?
No.
You don't mention in your statement that you sent this email to CEP, only to Simcoe. Why is that?
I don't recall having sent it to CEP until just seeing the email that you've shown me.
I see. Does that mean that when you were preparing your statement, nobody showed you the version of this email you sent to the version that you sent to CEP?
No, I'd just seen the one sent to Simcoe.
Why didn't you consider sending this email to end customers outside the group of fabricators?
I don't recall, and I don't recall. I can't recall who even received that email, apart from the two that you've shown me. I don't know. Let's
now look at the text of the message. If you can go back to it, please, MET 3053173, page 79. This is the one sent to Graham Smith and John Simmons, copied to Claude Vale. And Peter Froelich, as we can see. I'm just going to show the whole thing to you, take it slowly. You say, hi, as you may be aware, there had been some reports via BBC concerning a fire on a building in UAE regarding ACM. As a business, we are aware of this report and our technical team are following the details, but in the meantime, I wanted to add some thoughts that may help if you get questions from your customers, stroke clients, etc. Regarding the supply of Reynobond in the UK, as you know, we supply both PE and FR core and can control and understand what core is being used in all projects due to the controlled supply route we have. By only supplying Reynobond to a very small group of approved fabricators and working very closely with them on all projects, we are able to follow what type of project is being designed stroke developed and then offer the right Reynobond specification, including the core. At this stage, we will continue to offer both PE and FR core and continue the close working relationship we have with our approved fabricators to make sure the right technical support, Reynobond specification and materials are being used and installed on Reynobond projects. Many thanks for making me aware of the reports and for your continued support. Just looking at those two paragraphs before the end, the third and fourth paragraphs, the one starting regarding the supply of Reynobond and the next one, which starts at this stage. Just looking at those two paragraphs, when you wrote those two paragraphs describing Arconic's practice there, was what you said in those paragraphs true?
I think looking back on it, they were sent as some information to the fabricators to give them some comfort that we were aware of what was going on. I think some of the language that's been used in it is, I wouldn't necessarily put back in there again. It's probably heavy on the sales side.
Can you, well, let's go through it. Let's go through it. I'm going to come back to that answer shortly if I can, because I just want to understand it a little better. But before we do, let's just see if we can break down for absolute clarity what it is you're saying here. Was it true that Arconic controlled and understood what core was being used in all projects?
No.
Was it true that Arconic worked very closely with the fabricators it approved?
We did work closely with the fabricators that we were supplying materials to.
Was Arconic able to follow what type of project was being designed or developed?
Only through the CRM system and the information that was being put and developed in there.
Was it true that Arconic would then offer the right Reynobond specification, including the core?
No.
So those four statements I've just put to you, of those four statements, two were false and two had to be qualified in the way you've done. That's right, isn't it?
Yes.
So it wasn't true to say to your fabricators, including CEP, that Arconic informed itself in sufficient detail about each project so as to be able to advise whether an FR core or a PE core was suitable?
No.
If it wasn't true, why did you make those statements?
As I say, look, and reading back on it now, it was not the right thing to put in there, and it was, as I say, very heavy on in terms of the wording. It was too heavy on the sales side, to basically give customers some comfort that we were still able to continue with what we were doing.
heavy on the sales side, what do you mean?
As in, it was a document that was sent to give them some reassurances that the business was comfortable with offering the materials that we were offering, and that it was all still okay for us to use and supply.
Based on at least 2 false statements.
As I say, reading the details again in the context of what we're looking at now, then it wasn't the right thing to have sent.
You knew at the time that at least 2 of these statements I've put to you were false, didn't you?
I wouldn't have said I'd looked at it in that sense. As I say, I was sending a communication out to our customers to say that they were still okay to deal with us, and that we were still providing materials in the way that they needed.
When you told CEP and other fabricators that Arconic informed itself in sufficient detail about each project so as to be able to advise whether an FR core or a PR core was suitable, not only was that false, but it appears that you knew it was false. Is that right?
No, I wouldn't have necessarily known that in that context at the time. As I say, reading it now in the details that we're looking at today, no, I wouldn't have sent that information out.
What have you learned since you wrote this email you didn't know at the time? Which when you wrote it at the time, you didn't know that what I just put to you was false.
I've learned a huge amount since. I mean, an enormous amount. As I say, as I've said numerous occasions, the topic of fire, my understanding of it, the implications of it were just not discussed in the market. So I was basically trying to give the customers that were asking at the time some reassurances that we were doing the right things. And the wording that I've used in that was, looking back on it now, was not necessarily the right thing to have, what was not the right way to have worded it or sent it.
Let's take the 2 statements that you accepted straight away were false. Arconic control and understand what core is being used in all projects. Not only was that false, but you knew that was false at the time.
As I say, at the time of writing it, I hadn't thought of it in that context. I didn't write it knowing that that was the context it was being written in.
When you said in this email that Arconic controlled and understood what core is being used in all projects, you accepted that that was a false statement. What I'm putting to you is that when you made that false statement, you knew it was false. Do you accept that?
Some of the wording in there, as I say, was not in the way that it should have been. And so, yes, some of that wording should not have been put in there in the way that it was, in the context of what we're looking at, how we're looking at it today.
Ms. French, there's a difference, I would suggest to you, between unfortunate wording that could be worded better, on the one hand, and a statement that is factually false on the other. Do you understand that difference? I
do understand the difference, and I'm just trying to explain that at the time, with the market in the way that it was, with the knowledge that I had, then I'd written that in that vein. I had not written that deliberately to write false information in there.
When you wrote in this email that Arconic controlled and understood what core is being used in all projects, you accepted that was false. What was it that led you to think that it was true?
There was sometimes customers would ask for warranties on the buildings. There was a warranty questionnaire that would have been sent in to Merksheim, and there was information on there that could have been picked up if it wasn't relevant, because they wouldn't have offered a warranty against the questionnaire. So that would have been the information that we could have been looking at.
In the first of the 2 paragraphs I'm taking you to, you don't say sometimes. What you say is that you supply and can control and understand what core is being used in all projects.
Yeah, and as I've explained, reading back on some of that wording, it was not, and looking at the context that I wrote it then and the context of how I'm writing it now, looking at it now, I wouldn't have written that.
what was it at the time that led you to believe that the statement that Arconic can control and understand what core is being used in all projects was true?
I don't know.
What was it that led you to believe that Arconic could offer the right Reynolds specification, including the core? Was true.
I don't know.
I'm bound to suggest to you that at least in those two respects, those statements were not only false as you have accepted, but you knew them to be false.
As I've explained, if I'd understood the context of what I was doing at the time, then I wouldn't have worded it in that way. I did not write that information on there with that intention.
Can we look at page 12 of your second witness statement, please? And I'd like to look with you, please, at paragraph 44. And you say 4 lines down, you say this, how the finished product was assembled and whether it complied with relevant regulations was a matter for the customer or otherwise the person who designed the rain screen cladding system. Now, how do you reconcile that statement as part of your witness statement with the email of the 13th of May that we've just been looking at?
Yeah, I can't. And as I explained, and I would say the same thing again, looking at that email now, and in the context of what I wrote at the time, then I did it for those reasons. And some of the wording was not how I would be writing it now with the knowledge that I now have.
Do you think it might actually be the case that what you wrote in your 13th of May email was true, and what you're saying in your statement about not knowing about the finished product and it being a matter for the customer was untrue?
No, what's in my statement is true. It is down for the people. They understand what the final end use of the building is going to be.
Now let's look at your witness statement at paragraph 96.4 on page 32, please. You say here, and this is, just to be clear to you, this is 96.4. This is in relation to this email. And that in fact starts on in the previous paragraph, 96.3. Perhaps we should just show you that for the full context, to be fair to you. 96.3, on the 13th of May 2013, I sent an email to Graham Smith, etc., etc. And then you say in 96.4, I do not recall sending this email, but reading it now, I think it requires some clarification. In particular, and then you say at 96.4.1, Arconic did not proactively check what core had been ordered for any particular project and whether that core complied with building regulations or any other legislation. Neither do I ever recall advising any customer that they required a particular core or that a certain core was inappropriate. I was in no position to do so. What I meant was that technical support was available, if it should be needed, through the technical sales support team. Over the page. It's support team. If the customer had queries about the product, including the core. In practice, this would involve me seeking a response from the technical sales support team and providing this to a customer, or asking for the technical sales support team to engage with the customer direct. I just want to focus, if I can, on the words at the bottom of the previous page and the top of this page. Let's just look at them again. If we go to the bottom of the previous page, you say, what I meant was. We go back there, you say, what I meant was that the technical support was available if it should be needed through the technical sales support team if, over the page, customer had queries about the product, including the core. Now that sentence there, is that not completely contradictory of what you said in your 13th of May 2013 email?
Yes, it doesn't, the two don't correlate.
No, they don't. Sorry.
But as I've explained, having read that email again, and in the context of how I wrote it at the time, and I am now saying that my knowledge now, I wouldn't have written it in the way that I have.
But it's not that they don't correlate. They're completely contradictory of one another, aren't they?
Yes.
And if you had really meant at the time that a customer should contact the technical sales support team if they had any queries, then you would very simply have said so in your email.
Yes, I would have done.
Well, why didn't you?
I don't know.
In fact, you wouldn't have put anything that we've seen in the last, or those two main paragraphs of that email out to your customers, would you?
No, and as I say, having read that email, I wouldn't have written it in that way, and I don't know what I was thinking to do it.
Well, why would you have told your valued customers in this small group of fabricators who were essential for your route to market a series of lies? Why would you have done that?
So I didn't set out to do that. Wasn't my intention at all. And having reread that, then my knowledge now, I wouldn't have written it like that.
And I feel bound to suggest to you that the clarification that you're setting out here in your witness statement is an argument you've come up with after the event to try to get away from what you said to all of your fabricators in your 13th of May email.
No, I'm just trying to explain how I would think about that now rather than the way that I did at the time.
And in fact, your practice as described at the time was true at the time you made it. You made no false statements to your customers, but what you've come up with in your statement, trying to explain that email away, is the true falsehood here. You accept that?
Sorry, so I'm not following what you're asking me.
What I'm putting to you is that your email of the 13th of May was actually true in all its respects. You made no false statements to your customers. And it's your witness statement now which is false in pretending that the contents of that email were, as you say there, requiring explanation, but in fact false, as you've explained.
No, I don't believe that's right.
Going back to, or going on to paragraph 96.4 in yours, 96.4.2 of your statement, just below what we've been looking at, you say Arconic did not have approved fabricators in any formal sense. Rather, Arconic simply supplied Reynobond to a small number of fabricators in the UK. I felt that working with a small number of fabricators would generate a form of brand loyalty, so that they would be willing to recommend Reynobond when responding to tenders. The UK fabricators that Arconic primarily worked with were Simco, CEP, Sotape, CGL, and Argonaut. We occasionally worked with a fabricator called Ash and Lacey and some other full fabricators, but this was not often. Now, is it your evidence that, contrary to what you say in the 13th of May 2013 email, Arconic doesn't have approved fabricators in the UK?
We don't have, no, there wasn't approved. They didn't have to go through a set of procedures or demonstrate anything to be an approved fabricator.
Yeah. In truth, supplying to a small group of known fabricators was a marketing strategy, wasn't it?
Yes.
It wasn't for reasons of Arconic's assurance about safety, whether fire safety or any other quality assurance.
No.
Was it not, though, true that you, whether they were approved in that sense or simply part of your marketing strategy, was it not the case that you worked with a small number of fabricators so that you could keep a close eye on each project and be able to give bespoke advice about whether the right core was going onto the right building?
No, the main reasons for only working with such a small group was that fabricators at the time were looking for us to pass any leads that we had, which was relatively small compared to some of our competitors, onto them. We would only pass those leads on to one or two of them at a time, rather than some of our competitors that would give a lead out to the majority of the fabricators.
I'm sorry, do you want to finish your answer?
That was the main reason for it, was passing of leads and generating leads and awareness of Renabond, or any work that they were picking up that they would look to pass on, look to get Renabond involved with.
If the 13th of May email, 2013 email, was as false as you've accepted that it was, what was the point of sending it?
As I say, having read it again and looking at the context at the time rather than the context of what we all understand now, I don't know.
What message were you seeking to convey to the fabricators in that 13th of May email?
I can't answer that question. I don't know.
Did anybody more senior to you in Arconic require you to send that email in those terms?
I can't recall.
Did you tell anybody in Arconic that you couldn't send this email out in this form because it was substantially false?
Sorry, say that again.
Did you tell anybody in Arconic, Peter Froelich, for example, Claude Vale, for example, that you weren't prepared to send this email out to this valued group of fabricators because it contained substantially false statements?
I don't recall.
You would have done, wouldn't you? If you had been put up to sending out an email to valued customers, fabricators being your customers, which you knew was substantially false, you would have objected, wouldn't you?
I would have questioned it. As I say, having read that document again in the context of at the time of what my knowledge at the time, I wouldn't, and looking at the context of it now, I wouldn't have sent it.
We've seen no trace of any communications between you and Claude Vale or Mr. Froelich, Peter Froelich, in which you tell them that you're not prepared to send this message in this form with these statements in it to your customer base. Do we take it from that you never did object to doing so?
I don't recall.
And I'm going to suggest to you that you didn't do so. And the reason you didn't do so is because there was nothing to object to. And the reason there was nothing to object to is because there's nothing false in any of those statements. You were quite content to send them out.
I don't know. I can't answer that.
Now, can we just go back to the presentation we saw in June 2013? It's MET 30199917. We looked at this earlier on at a different point in the questioning. This is your presentation of June 2013. Do you remember we looked at this? And it says sales meeting June 2013. Was this a sales meeting such as that you would attend every year at Merksheim, or perhaps twice a year at Merksheim?
Possibly. Yes, I don't recall, but possibly.
Yes. What was the target audience of that meeting, or rather of this slideshow?
If it was the annual sales meeting, it would have been the other managers, sales managers from other countries, European countries. Sometimes there was internal sales people there, technical team, and various other people from production and further up would be coming in and out.
Now, we looked at page 10 earlier on. Let me just remind you of what that looks like. page 10 of this slideshow. This is the route to market slide we saw earlier on, and I asked you some questions about that. If we go to the next page, page 11, there's a specific message to Taylor Maxwell and fabricators I don't think we did look at, which is why I'm coming to it now. It says on the right, there's a picture of the British Isles, not a particularly accurate one, in blue, with the geographical locations of what you call approved RB fabricators. And there's a list of 6 of them: CGL, Sotec, CEP, Simcoe, Downer, and Argonaut. And the messages on the left-hand side in the red next to the bullet points say: sell specification to architects, sell concept of special colour, offer to match other materials, push design, stroke effects, stroke NAT, understand what the client, and this is in capitals, really wants, understand what the client really wants, CPD presentations to architects, get in there early. Now those messages in this slideshow, this is June 2013, only a month after you sent this May email, are consistent, aren't they, with the message that you sent to these fabricators on the 13th of May 2013?
No, I don't think so. This is an internal document that was, this is what I would be talking to the fabricators, and basically what I was doing was talking to architects, focusing heavily on the special colours that we had, matching other colours from other competitors, promoting certain designs, which was being which is something we were being asked to do from Merxheim, i.e. design the effects in the natural. The understand what the client really wants was to do more with the colour and the aesthetics, to understand exactly what they want and what they wanted their building to end up looking like, and CPDs to architects.
Doesn't this slideshow, in particular page 10 we looked at, and this page, page 11, show that in fact you were operating, or seeking to operate, a tightly controlled supply chain?
No, only in as much as the main reason for working with such few, as I said, such few fabricators, was those fabricators would get a lot of leads in from other competitors who had got huge exposure to the market, far greater than Renabond, but they were competing very heavily with multiple fabricators. And part of what we were doing was any leads that we had, we would pass it to 2 or 3 of them, and therefore they weren't, the pricing of those projects potentially were only between sort of, you know, a small handful of those fabricators rather than multiple fabricators.
When you see in the third bullet point from the bottom, understand what the client really wants, why did you accentuate the word really?
I don't know, I can't recall. It's a presentation that was put together for internal purposes and was not sent out externally.
What did you mean by understand what the client really wants?
In terms of, generally, in terms of colours and what they want it to look like.
And that presumably was entirely consistent with the idea that you knew what product was going on to what building in what project.
No, it was to understand what colour that they particularly wanted. But as I say, that was written at the time for an internal document for a presentation only. This was not necessarily anything that was given out to those fabricators specifically, or I would have necessarily discussed with those fabricators.
I'm not suggesting that it was given to the fabricators. What I am suggesting is that this reflects your own strategy. And what I'm suggesting specifically is that the strategy that you are presenting to your sales colleagues in June 2013 is entirely consistent with the messages that you were giving your fabricators, indeed members of this self-same list on this slide. You accept that?
I don't recall. I don't recall what my thought process was in terms of what the itemised areas would have been of the word really.
Well, when you say you don't recall, I'm not really sure I understand what you mean by don't recall. Here's a document you made, I'm showing you. And even though you may not be able to remember precisely your thought processes, what I'm suggesting to you is that your internal strategy, as demonstrated by this slide, was entirely consistent with the email you sent to your fabricators.
No, I wouldn't necessarily put those two together in that context.
You wouldn't necessarily put them together. What I'm suggesting to you is that you can put them together, because the 13th of May email matched externally what you were saying internally.
No, I don't think that was the reason I put this slide together. That wasn't my thinking on this slide here. It was purely to generate how we were going to be generating additional leads and awareness in the market. I don't believe it was anything to do with that.
Understanding what the client really wants rather suggests some kind of tailoring or bespoking of your product to the client's needs. Isn't that right?
I think this was written in the context of understanding how we could increase our awareness within the market. No, nothing more.
I would suggest to you, just before we break, that the messages that you're giving to your sales team in this document is completely inconsistent with the idea that Reynobond 55 sheets leave Arconic's factory unfabricated, and that is the last you hear, see, or know of their destiny. You accept that?
Once they'd left Merksheim and arrived with a fabricator, on a lot of occasions we wouldn't see anything to do with the project after that. I took various pictures of, or obtained various pictures of finished projects, but not necessarily all of them. So I wouldn't necessarily follow those projects once their materials had left us.
Mr. Chairman, I've got one very short question still on this document.
Well, you better ask it, Mr. Millett.
It is very short. If we could just turn to the next page of this slideshow, please. Here is a list of, I suppose, logos, really, of well-known construction companies in the UK. You can see Keep Moat, Waits, Lovell, Balfour Beatty, Wilmot Dixon. These are familiar names under the heading Route to Market. What was the purpose of this slide?
I don't recall. I think it was that we were starting to, our fabricators would be working with some of those people, and that's again who we would start to get exposure through some of those routes. No more, no less.
Did you deal with any of these organisations directly, or were you looking to deal with them directly?
No, we wouldn't have had any need to deal with them directly in that sense. It was more.
What was the relevance of these organisations to your business?
That our fabricators would be working at some point through them, and that our awareness of Reynobond awareness would then be filtering its way through to these people, because they would be using the Reynobond material on site.
I see. Very well. Mr. Chairman, is that a convenient moment? I should just say we will be coming back to the May email after the break. But,
yeah, I think we should have a break at that point, Mr. Millett. Miss French, we're going to stop there so we can all have some lunch. We'll come back at 2:05, please. And please remember not to talk to anyone about your evidence or anything to do with it over the break. All right? 5:05. Thank you very much.